If you're a founder, marketer, or a go-to-market leader, you know that video is the highest leverage tool that we have. Of course, I could be biased here. What is the one tactical go-to-market play that actually moved the needle for you guys?
Your learnings, right? Share what you're building in public. Make sure that you're always, aligned with that North Star goal of making something that people want.
How have you guys managed to keep that buzz?
Another YC principle, which is like launch early, launch fast, launch before you even think you're ready to launch. I think the biggest reason for churn and users having a bad experience with the product is their expectations are here and the reality of the product is here.
How are you guys using, content and media right now to create almost like this new way of doing things, this new category?
Fundamental shift here is going from a standalone editing software to a background process or an agent.
A lot of people have the fear when it comes to like agentic creative. How do you guys position Mosaic as a tool for orchestrating taste rather than obviously just like automating output?
People don't want to change their workflows.
Thank you so much for jumping on the show. Welcome back to Go-to-Market Gurus Unplugged. If you're a founder, marketer, or a go-to-market leader, you know that video is the highest leverage tool that we have. Of course, I could be biased here, but it's also the biggest bottleneck. And for years, we've been told that the traditional way of doing things, the traditional way of editing to get high impact content in front of your audience is the only way of doing things. Our next guest obviously says that is a lie. So I'm joined by the founder of Mosaic, Adish, a YC-backed team building an agentic video platform. They aren't just adding AI features to an old interface. They've killed the timeline and replaced it with a canvas of multimodal agents. We're going to be unplugging the YC growth playbook, the challenge of killing a legacy mental model, and why orchestration is the only way to survive the next era of content. Adish, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for joining.
Cool. So much for having me.
Question one, we'll dive straight in. The YC reality check, right? So you're fresh out of the YC pressure cooker, as they would say. In that environment, with obviously lots of competition, lots of people around you doing amazing things, you have to find fast growth or naturally, quote unquote, die, right? Like, what is the one tactical go-to-market play, would you say, that actually moved the needle for you guys and maybe continues to do so?
Yeah, it's a great question. I honestly kind of resort back to two principles that YC does a really good job of instilling in, I think, every founder that goes through a YC batch, which is one, just make something that people want, right? Like, it's not all that difficult. There's not too many tactics to it. It's just talking to users, understanding what they want, and then building it, and talking to users again, and understanding if now you've kind of satisfied a niche problem, maybe a way to kind of get your foot in the door, but just start doing that process. And ideally, as you're doing that, share your learnings, right? Share what you're building in public, and attract the kind of people that are either your users or maybe your earliest supporters, your earliest adopters, to build somewhat of a following or a community around what you're doing, that movement, that company, that product. I think ultimately that's really what it boils down to. And that's kind of what we did, which is we just had an idea. Again, this idea was really just born out of a problem that we had ourselves, which was to, go around Palo Alto as Tesla engineers at the time and try and, count the number of Cybertrucks we could spot, and then to buy a share of Tesla stock for every Cybertruck we spotted, and try to make this viral video that, people would love. So we just had an idea to make a video. It wasn't like, hey, today we're going to start a startup and now we're going to figure out what we're going to build, and we're going to have these like tactical playbooks and strategies to get ourselves out there. It was just like a very natural progression from an idea that we had to make a video, just creatively tinkering around, to then finding, some problems and pain points with that, which is that, man, scrubbing through a lot of footage and like finding where these Cybertrucks appeared, and even just adding a simple counter and updating it was very manual and tedious. And we kind of bet that, a lot of people probably felt similarly with, the content that they recorded, maybe not counting Cybertrucks, but whatever content they were recording. And that's kind of the, the flywheel that you just need to start. And as you navigate through that idea maze and talk to users and make sure that you're always, aligned with that North Star goal of making something that people want, you'll kind of just get to a place where you're growing, or you're pivoting, or you're navigating this idea maze to maybe a new idea. But that process and starting that process, I think that's the hardest thing. So just start pulling on that thread and see where it leads you.
No, I like that. I like that a lot. I think what stood out to me the most is number one, typically the businesses that always do succeed are usually the ones that are built around founder-led problems, right? Like the fact that you guys had a problem yourself, you felt passionate about it, you wanted to solve it. And as you said, the more you pulled that thread, you realize that many others have that same problem. What a question for you, I think, obviously, early doors, right? You're building that, you mentioned obviously community. So you're building up this community of those who really love the product, right? Like you're super early, right? So it's like you're still refining things, like things aren't polished as of yet. How have you guys like maintain that level of interest, maintain that level of community and engagement? Because I think people typically struggle with that massively, right? It's like they get this initial interest and then it dies off. Like how have you guys managed to keep that buzz?
Yeah, it's a really, really good question. In fact, something that we kind of were debating early on, right? Which is, do we want to build in stealth and, release and launch when and only when we have a fully functional, refined, polished product? Or should we just build in public and kind of allow the process itself to help attract our earliest adopters, our earliest supporters, and our community? And to me, it's always a matter of like, okay, another YC principle, which is like launch early, launch fast, launch before you even think you're ready to launch, because that gets you that kind of feedback loop that you need that's so critical to making sure you're developing in the right direction. Uh, but two, like ideas are so easy to come by. Like anyone can think, hey, a cursor for video editing sounds like a phenomenal idea. But then there's like this whole chasm of technical and product and design decisions that you need to cross before you actually have something that works, that's functional, that provides
Mm,
utility, that is something that people actually want. So to me, like building in stealth, I think works for some businesses, for some companies, for some products. For us, it's much more of a let's just put this out there and understand whether people even want this, and if not, let's realign and recalibrate uh, to making sure we are building in the right direction. Um, but then to your point about, yeah, like how do we kind of balance setting or aligning expectations? I think the biggest reason for churn and like users having a bad experience with a product is their expectations are here and the reality of the product is here, right? But if you're authentic, if you're genuine, if you're like conveying to people the reality of where you are today and the fact that, hey, like everything may not be perfect, this is in early alpha or in
mm,
beta, let's temper your expectations, but hey, give us feedback, right? For our earliest users, we made everything free. We wanted them to just try it out, right? To give us the feedback, to create that feedback cycle. Then and slowly, then we started to like adopt people into our early design or beta program, where maybe we started charging them a little bit to make sure that this was something people are actually willing to pay for, because that's also a very like important distinction, right? Like, do you have users that are using the product because they're interested in the new technical innovation, or are they interested enough to pay and pull out their wallet and give you their credit card
mm.
because you're actually solving a problem that will help drive efficiency for them, their workflow, their business, their use case? So making sure to know when to cross that line between this is an early beta, early preview, to this is a viable beta. Maybe everything's not perfect, but for the earliest adopters, people that really need this, they're still willing to pay, and making sure you run that test, that experiment. And then, yeah, like having this kind of progressive rollout was very useful for us as well, because you're right. Like you'll see these product launches on Twitter, on LinkedIn, they'll blow up, right? Like million impressions, and then they kind of fall off and you're not sure what happened. And I think having a small, tight knit group of people that you have a quick feedback cycle with is actually the way to go, because you can give every single person immediate support, immediate communication, and
Mm.
build a level of trust that you can then slowly expand over time once you have more confidence in your product. So that's the way we did it. People may approach it differently, but it worked for us.
No, I like it. And it's clear to see that it's definitely paying off. I think a couple of things that stood out for me the most were the fact that you guys, the building public process allows you to build, as you've highlighted earlier on, more so a product that's aligned with your customers' needs, wants, desires, as it were. And then they feel more drawn in, listened to, more engaged to see you guys obviously naturally succeed. So it does show. I personally, if building a stealth versus building a public, I'm always going to build a public. I think it's the best move you can make because, as you said, you get that instant feedback. You can refine as you go along. You get a much more engaged community across the board, and you see the ROI. I think like from brand a lot earlier on. So yeah, no, love that, guys. So with that community element and with the fact that you guys are building very much around your users and their experience, I can imagine you've got two audiences, two motions. You want to, you've got, for example, like editors who want creative control. You have marketers, who want like scale and like variation. Like, how do you structure your go to market when different buyers kind of want different outcomes? Like, walk us through like the process and how you guys handle that.
I think that first and foremost, we thought about this from a product design perspective, which is, I think, the most critical design decision for our product in particular was one, you do have this kind of node-based workflow, as we call them mosaics, where you're stitching together these tiles that becomes your agentic workflow for video editing or video generation. And this is great because it allows you to create this reusable template. It allows you to scale up your content workflow using this reusable template, either through some sort of event-based triggers, right? Like a new file hits your Google Drive folder, automatically kicks off this predefined workflow for you. Or, hey, your YouTube channel published a new podcast. Let's go ahead and run this clipping workflow to automatically create clips and redistribute it out across your social channels. So, or leveraging our API to build in your own automations, maybe with your own software or your own SaaS. So this is great, and automation is definitely useful for those people that want to scale up their content. But then to your point, especially with something as visual as video, having granular level control kind of every step of the way, where you can come in and adjust the outputs of the AI, be able to, at a frame by frame level detail, tweak things, polish things, adjust things, move things, is so important for the like kind of upstream market of production studios and agencies and editors, right? And so one key feature unlock for us there was being able to, one, have an inline timeline editor baked into the canvas, right? Where
Mm.
every tile or every node represents a new timeline state where you can open that up almost like a Git-like version history, but now instead of code for your video. And you
Yeah.
can open up each of those different nodes or commits, if you might call it that, and see the timeline view there, edit it at a more granular level before continuing downstream, operations. That's one aspect to it, and that was something we baked into the product and the product design. But then the second aspect to it is being able to actually take your traditional editing softwares and plug them back with Mosaic, right? So taking your timeline that you've created in Mosaic, exporting it out as an XML, importing it into
Yeah.
Premiere or DaVinci Resolve or Final Cut Pro, and continue your editing there. That was the big gap that was missing for professional editing workflows, which I think has been a huge unlock for those kind of upstream personas. And I think let's kill the timeline. It's a catchy tagline. I don't think the timeline is necessarily going anywhere because this kind of inherent desire to have frame level control is still important. But I think there's a lot of things you can do as a pre-processing or a post-processing step that can be automated before you ever have to go into a timeline at all. And oftentimes you may avoid the timeline immediately, but we don't want to, and we don't position ourselves as wanting to kill Premiere or
Mm.
DaVinci or Final Cut and only allowing you to stay within Mosaic. We want to actually enable you, right? We want
Yeah.
to enable you as much as possible to plug back into your traditional tools, to ask someone to change their workflow completely for this new AI tool that they've never seen and are just testing. That's a big ask. And
Yeah.
so giving them that kind of level of security and comfort where they can bring this back into their traditional tools that they're used to, I think that's a big unlock. That's how we approach it just from like a feature and product design perspective when we think about these two different kind of needs, one for automation, one for granular level control. When it comes to the actual go to market though, I think that really it's a matter of one, which is very kind of again upstream, slow moving conversations with
Okay.
agencies or studios, right? That are looking to integrate this into their workflow to drive efficiency, and they have a long process of procurement, and there's conversations and demos and stakeholders and infosec and all of this stuff, right? And the go to market there is much like a typical kind of SaaS B2B um, experience where you're either getting inbound or you're doing some outbound. You're getting
Mm.
a lot of demos. You're having these conversations. Maybe some of them progress, and it's a slow moving process, but something that can result in high ACV for any partner or client that you have. Then there is the individual creator, right? The podcaster who doesn't have this whole process. They just want to sign up and start using the tool today. And we kind of offer that as well as, your self-serve typical kind
Mm,
of product experience. I think navigating both of those though has been a bit tricky, especially for a software like ours, which maybe for the average user is still intimidating, right? And that's kind of,
yeah.
I would say, a little bit ironic given that we started at an intimidating timeline in Premiere and DaVinci and thought this was too hard. And so we wanted to build something simpler. And the product feedback we still get from users is, hey, this is still too hard. I don't know what to do. So constantly trying to figure out how to lower the bar and make this software more accessible to the everyday consumer. But then also being able to provide all the custom integrations and functionality that, these like upstream agencies and studios might need has been a hard, I'd say, balancing act and something that we're
Mm.
still actively figuring out.
I guess on that front, it kind of depends on where like your biggest market it naturally lies. Like in terms of you look at your customer pool, for example, like realistically speaking, like are a lot of them upstream, like the upstream personas that you spoke about, are they agencies, are they CMOs, creative high end creatives, or is it the more self-serve users where they just want to create some content? They've recorded some Teslas, for example, or Cybertrucks, and they just want to produce some cool content, get it live quickly. I think like it's one of those things where building, maybe focusing there first and then developing that out. But I completely can appreciate how that must be a challenging line to walk, because you're going to be getting like feature requests from both sides of that coin, right? It's kind of like, hey, like we would love to have this level of like detailed customization, and the other side is like, hey, like can you just make it simpler? So I can appreciate. How would you say
Yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
how would you say like you've like made, maybe based on obviously that challenge, or that contrast, right? Like, a big thing with any sort of SaaS product when it comes to success is turning your customers into brand advocates, right? Like how are these individuals, or how are you positioning these individuals as like your internal champions? Like, is there a process behind that? Have you noticed that there's people who are, your advocates pushing this way of doing things forward as well? Like, where does that sit for you guys?
I think you kind of, hit the nail on the head. It's definitely difficult to develop for both audiences. And so what we've kind of taken the approach of is the Canvas product, which was kind of our first product, which we released in early October. We kind of let it run wild and, saw where the initial traction came from, what audiences, what personas most gravitated towards it, found the most utility and value from it. And it really is the kind of enterprise agency SaaS that wants to develop workflows, leverage the automation or kind of the inherent A/B testing ability of like a branching node-based workflow to get to rough cuts 10x faster or automate some part of their content workflow. And that's where we've seen the most traction ourselves. It's also where we've just seen people being willing to pay the most for a product like this. Now, that being said, I think there's a huge untapped potential in market for the consumer, the everyday consumer. But it would require changes to the canvas, which genuinely are probably not even worth making. I think there's definitely some things we can do to lower the kind of bar to entry onboarding flow, guided onboarding flow, and have it be a little bit more accessible to the everyday consumer. But I think the UI there and the expectation there, especially given like such simple tools like ChatGPT and Replit agent and Lovable, like these very simple interfaces where the complexity is actually hidden behind the complex
Mm,
interface, and the complexity is on the agent and its tool calling ability, its ability to orchestrate. That's where the complexity lies. For the everyday consumer, that's the interface that they have now gotten accustomed to, and that's the interface we need to build for a consumer base like that. So we think of these markets as distinct, and we think of the interfaces that will solve their problems as distinct as well. And so
mm,
um, the Canvas product very much now gearing towards kind of an inbound, continuing to like process all the inbound interest and product led growth, but also the outbound motion and kicking that off and seeing what other traction we can drive for the Canvas product with these enterprise agency personas in
mm.
mind. And then the kind of more consumer angle really will require a new interface and a new product, and something that we're excited to share with the world pretty soon.
Oh.
And in terms of what the actual, like, how do we, get existing customers to become our brand advocates? I think genuinely it goes back to kind of building in public, being authentic, building trust, right? Like, if a user has feedback, whether they're on a free tier, a paid tier, they're an enterprise, treat everyone with the same level of respect
Mm,
and acknowledgement of their feedback. Even if you can't address something right away, we aim for like sub-minute response times. We try to address every piece of feedback we can. And we just try to be proactive about if someone runs into a bug and maybe they don't even know yet, we reach out to them prior to them even knowing about the bug. And we tell them, hey, we saw that this happened in our logs. We're fixing it right now. And then we follow up, right? And these kind of consistent daily acts of follow up, of building trust, when you do that, you kind of develop this genuine community around you that is authentic and becomes your brand advocates. And then the way we kind of materialize that, case studies I think are going to be a big thing over the next month. We want to like
mm.
talk with a few key customers that we have and understand how they've leveraged Mosaic. What has their particular workflow been? What efficiency gains have they seen? And then be able to kind of share that as a template that other people can reuse and
Mm.
recycle.
No, I love that. I think, of course, within the world of case study capsules or or customer success stories, I think if you're able to produce like four solid versions of those every single year, like they're going to carry you a very long way. And we're a big advocate of that. I think that is where you do typically then see like internal champions, as you highlighted, right? Where it's like other people are saying, "Hey, here's what my life was like before." Mosaic existed, and now like here's the transformation. Here's what takes place. Here's the success that we can see. So love that. I think, of course, off the back of everything you've shared, there's definitely a big, I think, is it clear to see that you guys aren't just selling, of course, software, right? Like there's a big push here of like a new way of thinking, a new way of processing content, a new way of approaching like, content workflows. There's a big thing and a big shift within marketing in general when it comes to brand is, systems. Like how do we implement systems to drive further growth? How do we implement systems so we can decrease our time to asset or our time to market, right? So how are you guys using, content and media right now to create almost like this new way of doing things, this new category? Like, so most companies just focus on the features, they focus on like, the tech stack as it were, but like how are you guys convincing people like the old way is okay, but like there is a better way of doing things?
From the very start, we've always thought about our approach as a fundamental rethinking of what traditional nonlinear video editors offer, which is a very manual approach where you can really only run one thread at a time in parallel. The canvas-based approach made it so that it's actually nonlinear, right? Now you have the ability to run multiple threads in parallel. You have the ability to A/B test multiple variants in parallel. And you have the ability to define these workflows as reusable templates for a particular content type or scenario that you can reuse and recycle via API, via triggers. Um, so that in itself has shifted the way we think about video editing as this like standalone software that you come into, upload your videos into, run your manual tedious edit in, export out from, post to your socials, have a mental model of what's performing, and then use that context in your mind to guide your next edit
Mm,
as more of a standalone kind of background process that is constantly running, potentially listening for
mm,
new uploads to your YouTube or Google Drive folder, automatically kicking off a agentic workflow for you, and then maybe posting back out to your socials. And I think the like memory that you can build into your agent based on either reinforced feedback from the human, or from data sources, connecting your socials to Mosaic and seeing what's actually performing well versus not. That feedback loop to build that kind of longer term memory into your agent, will be crucial as I think like everyone is thinking about this, right? Who's building agentic applications is how do you actually build these agentic applications such that they're personalized, such that they're intelligent
mm,
across the context of who you are, what's happening in the world today, and what's performing well or not for you and your business, your work stream. Um, so I think like the kind of fundamental shift here is going from a standalone editing software to a background processor and agent, which is your kind of co-pilot. It's constantly listening, running your
Mm.
edit for you. And ultimately, this is going to become much more contextually aware, something that is genuinely in tune with your persona, your brand, the content that's going out today across the world, what's happening in the world today, being able to source its own assets from the web, and from your personal library. Like that whole kind of context and integration is going to be the key piece to make this truly shift from a standalone editing software to what we have now, which are these agentic workflows, which are still
Mm.
predefined sequences of steps, to a fully autonomous agent, right? Something that can genuinely just do its own editing and create its own editing plan and orchestrate its own set of tool calls and tiles based on all of that context that it's provided.
I like what he said, that human feedback loop. And, and I think obviously over time, obviously that compounds, as you said, that will very much contribute and guide, I guess, what that autonomous process looks like. Because naturally, a lot of people have the fear when it comes to like agentic creative, like the AI will make everything kind of look generic, look the same, as it were. Like, we lose that soul, lose that authenticity. So I love how you position that. But I think on that topic, like how do you guys, I guess, position Mosaic as a tool for orchestrating taste rather than obviously just like automating output? Because there's lots of tools that can accelerate time to asset or time to feed. So it's like, how are you positioning Mosaic in that regard?
That's a really great question. How do you even think about taste and building taste into your agent, right? I think there's some kind of like low-hanging fruit here, which we've already somewhat tackled and are continuing to tackle, which is one, like getting an agent to understand a particular style, right? So if I
Yeah.
really like, Casey Neistat's video editing style, and I want to take my content and edit it in his style, being able to provide that as a reference so the agent can go understand that style, create some sort of like inherent understanding of, okay, what are the kind of motion paths of this video or the typographies or the fonts or the colors, and being able to encode that in a document or some sort of context where it can then leverage that to have taste, right? But even then, this is a taste by proxy, right? This is
Yeah.
taste by reference. And so, how do you actually bake in a taste into your agent? I mean, this is a very difficult question to answer, but how we try and think about this is thinking about video editing really as a science, right? So if you think
Mhm.
about every kind of shot from 2001 Space Odyssey, there's some genuine like science there where, Stanley Kubrick is making very like intelligent and um I would say, very perceptive decisions about how to frame certain shots or have the camera angled in certain ways,
Mm.
how to zoom in or how to pan. Like these are all very these are all kind of the scientific decisions that an artist, a creative, a video editor can make. Now everyone has their own personal touch that they apply to it, but if you can somehow take that kind of, you know, science of video editing and codify that into an agent, you actually give it some of the kind of arms and legs to have its own
Mhm.
creative taste. That's really easy to say. It's really, really hard to do. And I think we're still trying to crack that nut. But this is kind of where we're at and how we think about this.
I like thinking behind it. And again, as you said, it is taste by proxy or taste by reference. And I think typically taste is very much a personalized, it's a subjective thing, right? Like, you might like one thing, I might like something else. But I do think I can definitely see a world where, these agentic workflows, these like most, AI gen tools that people are using, like we're able to, even if you don't have taste, it will give you taste, right? And something that most people will genuinely enjoy if you're able to create and post and share that content. So yeah, I can see it happening, and I think that the thinking makes a lot of sense. I think, I guess, to wrap things up, right? So there are tons of tools that are, as you said, trying to crack that nut and trying to figure out, how do they position themselves at the forefront, the intersection of, I guess, yeah, agentic workflows, is agentic creative, in addition to just this new era of media, right? That's unlocked to absolutely everybody, regardless of whether you had experience or technical skills before. Like, how are you guys, if you look 12 months down the road, what is the one thing that you guys are building right now? Like, what's that one moat that you would say that is, that positions you guys, above the rest or ahead of the rest, as it were, in the long run? Like, what is that? What does that look like for you guys?
Yeah. So I think there's a couple like key aspects to thinking about this. That being said, like I genuinely think the only moat today is speed of shipping because everything you build is easily replicable. Um,
Mm,
we have a little bit of a head start given that, we started tackling this problem, I'd say before a lot of these like AI video editing tools out there. But that being said, like that still isn't enough. We have so much competition in this space. Like AI video is the new hot topic, mostly on the generative realm. So I think the fact
mm,
that we're one positioning ourselves in the kind of editing realm with generative assets kind of supplementing your own storytelling and creative taste is a great way to uniquely differentiate ourselves with all of that competition. But yeah, like if you think about what AI coding and how hot it was in like 2022 to 2025, I think AI video and video editing is that new hot topic. Every day you're seeing new video gen models, new capabilities, new startups, new products. um, I think the way that we differentiate ourselves, and try to create a moat beyond just having very, very fast turnaround times and speed of shipping and having that velocity and maintaining it consistently is one, like building something that genuinely solves a problem that people have, and then trying to kind of have that workflow shift occur lockstep with our platform. So when someone is adopting a workflow within Mosaic and that workflow change occurs where they're going from Premiere or some sort of media asset management library to having Mosaic just take care of the entire process, right? From
mm,
upload to transcoding to ingestion to different proxy versions to then getting the timeline cut into Premiere. If Mosaic can handle all of that, it becomes a core piece of their workflow. And so
mm,
when you have that workflow change, what you also have is the potential to kind of in lockstep become a critical component in a broader workflow. So by doing that, we become, I think, a key part of people's content or production workflows. And I think that once you're once you've kind of got that workflow change, um, having people change out of that workflow again, there's like a barrier, right? And we felt that again early on, which is why we actually had to integrate with tools like Premiere and DaVinci and Final Cut because people don't want to change their workflows. This is just a common and ubiquitous truth. Like when people have a workflow that works and that exists, having them have that lift to change their workflow is very, very, I'd say there's a lot of friction there. And so if we can become a part of that workflow, we can actually become part of that, like critical primary workflow that they have. The second thing I think is what I alluded to earlier, which is building a memory into your agent, right?
mm,
Something that can actually have a long-term memory of who you are, what's your brand, what's worked in the past, and learn from actions you take and reinforce itself using that human feedback, but also integrate with all your data sources, whether that's again your media asset managements, your Google Drives, your Dropbox, your YouTube, and your social medias, right? And have an understanding of what works, what doesn't
mm.
work. I think having a long-term memory built into your agent, one where it's integrated and has context, that's going to be key as well. So those two things are really what we're looking at and thinking about.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think in the long run, fundamentally, it will position you guys as, especially if you are integrating into workflow into current workflows as an industry standard, something that needs to happen. It's a step that won't be missed. But at the same time, I think over the next like 12 to 24 months, we will naturally see like a big shift within the space as a whole, which means that the lane that you guys are creating for yourself, I think is a great play. Like, create for yourself a new lane, get people thinking about things in different ways, but at the same time, it doesn't feel so far removed from what they're currently doing because you've seamlessly integrated into what they already know, right? So they feel comfortable. So when you introduce new ways of doing things, it's like, you know what, like, yeah, this doesn't make sense anymore. Like, I might as well commit and move over fully into this new world. So yeah, no, I'm excited to see where you guys are in the next like 12 months, and I'm excited to see like, yeah, just more use cases and how everybody's obviously using Mosaic. I think definitely going to be having a conversation with our head of production to see how we can use Mosaic more within our own content workflows, because some of the stuff you highlighted, I was like, damn, I hadn't thought about that. That's a nice way of using, as you said, like your systems.
100%. Let us know how we can help, even with this podcast. Like, I want to create some clips for you guys and share it with you. I think that there's a huge use case for podcasts, for creatives, for companies, all around the board.
Yeah, thank you so much. I saw your post the other day, by the way, just a really side point on captions and typography. Like, and I have to say, typically speaking, most like applications that I see that attack typography, like either look super generic, looks like everything else that we've seen. But I love like I do love like the stylistic flair that you added to them, and they felt premium. They felt like they felt familiar but in a nice way. I was kind of like, oh, okay, cool. I see where that's come from. I like that. Like, do you know what I mean? And I think there's some creators that I follow, and I'm always saving like either style designs or how they've done certain things. And I saw your breakdown as to like the new workflow when it comes to captioning and adding typography to videos. Big fan of that. Big fan of that. So yeah, it definitely caught my attention. But no, thank you so much for jumping on. I really appreciate your time today. I think a high level overview, some of the biggest takeaways in terms of how you guys are leveraging content, and obviously your approach to your go-to-market is build in public, build early, build a product obviously around their users. Your users become brand advocates. They then get bought into your journey, your success. A couple other things I thought that stood out was the fact that, it's not necessarily about, especially within the world of AI, it's not necessarily all around trying to transform or transition somebody into a new way or world of thinking. It's very much about how do we become part of what they're currently doing, and over time, they with that level of comfortability, they then look at this new way of thinking. It feels like a natural transformation, a natural transition, right? So yeah, lots of lessons to be learned here, and I'm looking forward to following the build and public journey, and wishing you guys even more success.
Thank you so much, man. And the one thing I will add to the content piece is, obviously we're building a video editing application. So a lot of the content we're putting out when it comes to building in public is dog fooding and editing video that, maybe I'm just recording myself, but editing that whole kind of piece through Mosaic. And so like doing that dog fooding not only allows me to use the product and see, where are things that can be improved, but also just like, I think that's very meta in it's kind of like building in public posts and content, which is that we're using our own software to create our own content. And I love the idea of doing that.
I did wonder, actually. I was like, because some of the stuff, I'm like, some of the content you've done, I'm like, damn, this is good. So I was wondering whether you were using your own. If you heard it here first, you know where to go, know where to sign up. Be sure to, of course, follow the journey. Sign up for a free trial, and yeah, let us know your thoughts. But no, thank you so much once again, and we'll see you guys on the next episode.